is understanding. We need to understand. And the main question is, are people born this way? There are 3 studies had been done. The first study is Levy study, Simon Levy, and what he said, a difference in hypothalamic structure. Here is the hypothalamus, so you don't have to struggle to know what hypothalamus is. You see this nice orange part here, that's the hypothalamus. And hypothalamus is right above what? The pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is very, very important gland that regulate all the hormones in the body. So you expect hypothalamus is very important organ as well. Tiny, tiny. And God put his mysteries in tiny stuff. So what he found, that there was a difference in the hypothalamic structure between heterosexual and homosexual men. Pay attention. And he reported in the Science magazine in August 1991. He professed to have found a group of neurons, nerve cells in the hypothalamus, and he called it INAH3, that appear to be twice as big in heterosexual men than in homosexual men. Levy theorized that this part of the hypothalamus has something to do with sexual behavior. Therefore, he concluded sexual orientation is somewhat biologically determined, meaning that the person is born this way because there is something in their brain to tell them to be this way. That's not the end of the story. The hypothalamus, just to give you an idea about this tiny, tiny orange organ that you see, does all kinds of stuff, like releasing hormones, regulating the body temperature, maintaining daily physiological cycle, controlling appetite, managing of sexual behavior, regulating emotion responses. The hypothalamus does all kinds of stuff. Critique of this study. All the 19 homosexual subjects died of AIDS. And we know that HIV, AIDS may affect the brain, causing chemical changes. So the question, did they have AIDS? And the AIDS affected their hypothalamus. Therefore, rather than looking at the cause of homosexuality, we may be observing the effect of HIV AIDS upon the brain. We know that syphilis can affect the brain. All kinds of sexual diseases can affect some in the brain. Also, Levy himself, the one who did the study, himself said what? It is important to stress what I did not find. I did not prove that homosexuality is genetic or find a genetic cause for being gay. I didn't show that gay men are born that way, the most common mistake people make in interpreting my work, nor did I locate any gay center in the brain. There is no homosexual center. Since I look for adult brains, we don't know if the difference I found were there at birth or if they appeared later. So he himself said, this is not conclusive to say that there is a genetic component in homosexuality. That's the first study. The second study, Bailey and Pillard study. They studied the prevalence of homosexuality among twins. You know twins? And adopted brothers, where at least one brother was homosexual. The authors therefore concluded there is a genetic cause to homosexuality. Critique of that study. The biggest flaw is the interpretation of the researcher. Since about 50% of the identical twins were not homosexual, we can easily conclude that genetics does not play a major part in their sexual orientation. If it had, then 100% of the twins should be homosexual, since identical twins share the same genetic makeup. See, if it is genetic, then the identical twins, 100% is supposed to be, if their brother is homosexual, they are supposed to be the same. But that was not the case here. We might just as easily interpret the finding to mean that environmental influences cause their homosexuality. Biologist Anne Foster Sterling of Brown University stated in order for such a study to be at all meaningful, we would have to look at twins raised apart. It is such badly interpreted genetic. So this study also doesn't really hold. The third study is Hammer study. Dean Hammer and his colleague of the National Cancer Institute, they said there is a linkage between the DNA. The media reports that the gay gene was discovered as a result of the study. Hammer estimated that the sequence of the given genetic markers on X chromosome, this is the X chromosome that you see, is not Y, X, is linked to homosexuality in 64% of the homosexual brothers. Dr. Kenneth Cleventon, assistant to the president of the Salk Institute in San Diego, states there is a body of evidence that shows the brain neural networks reconfigure themselves in response to certain experience. So the brain changes under certain experiences. Therefore, the difference in homosexual brain structure may be a result of behavior and environmental conditions, not necessarily has to do with something genetic. A Canadian research team using a similar experimental design was unable to duplicate that study of the twins. Hammer himself emphasized these genes do not cause people to become homosexual. The biology of personality is much more complicated than that. So the bottom line is there is no genetic component for somebody to be homosexual or lesbian. On top of that, in the Archives of General Psychiatry, in March 1993, stated, recent study postulate biologic factors as the primary basis for sexual orientation. However, there is no evidence at present to substantiate a biologic theory, just as there is no compelling evidence to support any singular psychological explanation. There is no single explanation for why the person is homosexual or same-sex attracted. Just there is no compelling evidence to support any singular psychological explanation. Critical review shows the evidence favoring a biological theory to be lacking. There is no biological, there is nothing in the brain to make the person this way. In an alternative model, the temperamental and personality traits interact with the familiar and social milieu as the individual sexuality emerges. And then the Journal of Neuropsychiatry of the spring of 1993, upon critical analysis of hormonal theories of homosexuality and transsexualism, there are no robust data to support the role of hormones in the development of this behavior or identities among humans. And not only that, in 2008, just 10 years ago, the American Psychological Association stated, although much research has examined the possible genetic, hormonal, developmental, social, cultural influence on sexual orientation, no findings have emerged that permit scientists to conclude that sexual orientation is determined by any particular factor or factors. They cannot explain it. They cannot explain it and say, okay, there are biological reasons. Many things that nature and nurture both play complex roles. Most people experience little or no sense of choice about their sexual orientation. So when we get to the biology, there is a preponderance of scientific evidence conducted over the past 80 years that shows homosexuality to be an acquired condition. Acquired means you are not born with it. You know, it happened down the road. and you have all kind of names of doctor here that said these are but a few of the psychiatrists and psychologists who have substantiated these findings through years of clinical research and empirical study. So there is no biologic or there is no reason for the person to be same-sex attraction. So, summarize, no one is born with a homosexual sexual orientation. There is no specific data to prove either a genetic or biologic determination causing to be same-sex attraction. No one chooses to have same-sex attraction. They are the result, and we'll get to that, of temperamental, familiar, environmental, and social condition. People can choose to change, and that's the most important point. People can choose to change and come out straight. Change is possible based on one person's real desire and practicing God love and acceptance. So change is possible, it's not impossible. But the person needs to say, I want to. That's very important here. You cannot make a person to change. They have to be willing. So it needs some time to come out straight. When wounds are healed and unmet needs fulfilled, gender identity will be experienced and heterosexual desire will ensure. What does the Bible say about homosexuality? I think the Bible is so clear. Leviticus 20. If a man also lie with mankind, as he lie with a woman, both of them are committed an abomination, something God hates. They shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. Say, well, that's the Old Testament. Well, what about the New Testament? 1 Corinthians, St. Paul, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. That's in Corinthians. What about in Romans? St. Paul, for this reason God gives them up to dishonorable passions, passion. For their women exchange natural relationship with those who are contrary to nature, women with women, and the men likewise give up natural relation with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless act with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. So the Bible is very clear, Old and New Testament, that this is something God hates. God didn't create, he can create Adam and he can create another Adam. God didn't choose to do that.